Sustainability, I'm going to go through some of these slides quick because I saw that we don't have much time, and I will speed up. But obviously something to keep in mind as we grow, being sustainable, not just building houses. We need to build communities. We've done houses for 40 to 50 years, and it seems as though we've stopped building communities. My radio show that we did was about small towns. Maui's always been an island of small towns and rural communities. They were distinct and separate, had their own sense of place. We know these communities. We grew up in the communities. We knew our neighbors. We looked out for one another, and they were sustainable, and they were at a human scale. You could basically get by living in these towns. You still would need to drive once in a while to go elsewhere, but you could get by in these towns. We also, those small towns were surrounded by agriculture and open space. The urban growth boundaries and the rural growth boundaries that John and Will were talking about can serve to protect our small towns. Another thing, of course, our Ohana family, friends, my son at May Day in the middle there. Of course, our island is multicultural. It's one of the beauties of our island, how diverse we are. I'll quickly go through some slides, but I wanted to show you, this was a draft that goes way back of the first version of the Maui Island Plan that came out, that was presented to the GPAC. When you look at it, it didn't seem that overwhelming. There's a lot of green left, but there are and were pockets of urban, largely central, west, and south Maui. We were concerned about that, and we'll show you why. The next set of slides came from the planning department, but what we did is we tried to just enhance them a little bit so we could identify a pattern. This is central Maui in the year 1933, an aerial shot. The red areas represent the villages, the plantations, your urban areas. In central Maui at that time, Wailuku, Kahului, Pu'unene, there was Upper Paia, Lower Paia, H-Poko, Hamakua-Poko was still there. Here's 1955 at the onset of the automobile. Here's the onset of our zoning code. And here's 2004. This pattern is what we're concerned about, and more concerning is the 2030 boundary. 1933, Suda store. It was your main development up there. Small outcrop down Makena, a couple plantation villages still upside there. 1955, there's some growth and development, again identified by the red. 1978, the water line's been brought down here. We're starting to see some rapid explosion. And here's 2004. There's a pattern going on here, and again, that's the concern we have. And we're not anti-growth in any way. I'm an evil developer. I do development. I'm not saying no growth in any ways. I'm saying let's work with the planning department and the people of Maui to have some options. The next set of slides, what we did was to try to help my local friends who were trying to follow this. They couldn't quite grasp what did this mean. What does this size really mean? And interesting enough, South Maui is not far away. Here is that same central Maui area dropped on Honolulu, the same scale. The exact same area, we just lifted it, dropped it, just to give us a sense or a comparison, a comparable. Here's central Maui, and here's San Francisco. It's half the size of San Francisco. Here's South Maui, where we're talking about today. A fairly large area. We took it and laid it on top of Honolulu, stretching from Kahala all the way up to past Tripler up to Red Hill. On the other hand, here's Paia with an expanded area. Oluwalu, similar size. So again, the idea is this a vision for Maui? And it is for many people, and that's fantastic. We just wanted to talk about some alternative ways to grow. Like John mentioned earlier, the urban boundaries are critical towards stopping sprawl. The onset of our zoning ordinance in the 1960s, we brought in wholesale from California an automobile-based zoning code. It has everything to do with automobiles, and very rarely does it take time to recognize the human, the environment, our culture, the Hawaiian people, plants, and animals. It involves the strict separation of land uses. Houses there, churches here, schools there, businesses there. So you got to drive to go anywhere for anything. That's what's guided our development of our land. Whoops, there we go. Versus traditional neighborhood design. Something that John and Will and Chris, especially, who's here with us tonight, could expand upon. Using a zoning code that focuses on building communities, not just housing. Building mixed-use communities, connective street networks, areas to we can gather and play. This is Central Maui. This is what you get when you use our zoning code of today. This is what you could get when you use a smart code. And I'll go through these other slides. This is not too far away. This is Portland. One of their streets, they actually have a transit in there. Crazy idea. This was interesting. I just put that slide in there just to show you that we have a highway down on Dairy Road that's got 7 lanes at one point. So it's there. We need to think about safe routes to schools. This is a neat example in Huntington Beach where they closed every other roadway is closed and shut down and became pedestrian only. This is where we're not going to send our kids down to go get a loaf of bread or some eggs if you came home and you forgot it. We need more of these. This is where I went to school at Humboldt State at the Quad. I think I can stop here, or I have one more slide to go to. John, you mentioned this earlier about challenging sprawl. It is critical that we adopt urban growth boundaries. Chris Hart proposed it in 1990. A world-renowned architect and planner, his name was Andres Duany, was here on a conference. He held up Chris Hart's draft plan and said it was the most gifted plan he's ever seen. Chris proposed urban growth boundaries and rural growth boundaries in 1990 to protect us from sprawl. It didn't happen. We'll talk about that later, Chris. It wasn't Chris's fault. It was very frustrating when that plan got taken away. Anyways, it's critical that we adopt this now. But not only do we adopt urban growth boundaries to lock in our small communities, what we do within the boundaries is just as critical. Just because we draw an urban growth boundary doesn't mean we're going to have a place that's worthy of cherishing and valuing some development. We have to be really cognizant of what we're going to do inside of those boundaries. And you guys all know these things. You've had workshops about them. Starting with urban town centers and working your way in a natural transit from urban to rural to agriculture to nature. It's a healthy model. It's found all over the country. The United States did this forever. Europe's done it forever. We did it up until before World War II. And shortly after that is when the automobile took over. I'm going to skip ahead to one thing we cannot overlook and we can't get enough help of. And I was talking with Daniel Kanahele before the meeting and even Lucien about the Ahamoku Council. We cannot overlook the cultural layer that exists on this island. And we should be looking at it every time we make any kind of decision. We should be consulting our kapuna and our elders because they know what it's about. They've been there, they've done it, and they can tell you what we've been doing now isn't working. These are 8 principles of learning the Ahupua'a according to, I'll just read one line. We're at another point in Hawaii's history when we have to relearn how to take care of the land. We need to understand the wisdom of the past and let that wisdom guide us today. And then lastly, on that note, every time we go to make a decision about this urban growth boundary or the rural growth boundary or whether or not to approve a project or deny a project, this is in us. We have an ability to make decisions grounded upon principles that the Hawaiians knew, but cultures all over the world knew. Piko Po'o, a connection to the past. Piko Na'au, a connection to the present. And then Piko Ma'i, a connection to the future. If we are able to keep that in mind, I think it's going to be really hard to go wrong. And I think the planning department's done a great job of doing this sort of process. And John said earlier we're in the 9th inning. But it is never too late to be doing things that you're doing tonight. Yes, there's been a tremendous amount of work that's been done, but the fact that you're here tonight is fantastic, and it's exciting that this many people came out despite us being so far in the process. So I commend you guys, and thank you for allowing us to share some ideas and values. Thank you.
And folks, we're going to open it up for some questions and answers now. So if the panel could go ahead and gather up on the stage here, and then we'll open it up for a few minutes of Q&A. So,
You want to bring the chairs up there?
if you'd like, otherwise you can stay.
I think on their side. We go check.
So we have Don Couch, anybody from the planning department, Chris Hart, and maybe Bill from the face. So.
Do you have a step to get up for Kehal? She wants to get up onto the stage. Can we help Kehal? Is there a stand or a chair? Kehal, they're grabbing one. They'll grab something.
Oh, right here.
Unless I can help on it. We wait. No rush. You came all the way here. No rush. No rush.
You thought this was a step.
No. Or wait, they're grabbing it. They're coming somewhere. Sure enough.
We have some.
You know where I was this past weekend? 2 weekends ago? Went to Disney on Oahu. To Aulani. Okay.
Where are we?
As you get positioned up here, anybody with the first question, we can get going on the, any comments? Okay.
I wanted to jump in, but that's okay. He took it up. He said security first.
Am I on? No?
I think this will be
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me back there? A little bit closer. Well, I'm real close. There we go. My name is Tom Kelly. I have been around the island for about the last 12 years. Some people are fortunate enough to be born here. Others are wise enough to come here. And I will start my question by telling you that I have been involved in business development for the last 40-some years. I like common sense development. I like a lot of the criteria you just shared with us. I'm very pro that. I'm very concerned. And I'm very concerned about something called Promenade, Pialani Promenade. I would love to hear Mr. Spence, the mayor, the developers from Southern California who brought all that urban sprawl to their wonderful environment, stand up here against your criteria and explain how their proposed project meets any of those criteria, let alone the majority of them. It's absolutely insane, and how we could go through a process that's kind of under the radar screen. I sat in and listened to the presentation on the Kihei Town Center. I thought that was very well done, very sensitive, a multi-use, walk-around, neighborhood feel kind of place. Putting a 1970s type outlet mall next to a proposed high school on the major access to the entire South Maui makes no sense.
If we could keep it to just one short question, please. One question. Make it a question, please.
The question's only relevant having heard my introduction. The question is that there were some very sensitive letters sent by Mark Hyde, emails, more than 2 months ago. There was a letter on March the 11th written by the president of KCA to the mayor, which I understand as of last week he hadn't even seen. I know that Don Couch and Spence have both had access to a number of these things. I would like to hear from both of you as to what is the exact status of this project. Are you in favor of it? If so, why? And what can we do to stop it?
What project is that?
Are we live?
Yes.
Okay.
light industrial
The- We have received the letters from the KCA and from Mr. Hyde and from you. We received a letter, my department received a letter from Councilman Couch asking, okay, what is the